Hello and welcome to Access Paranormal. Now tonight I've gone out and about, but not on a paranormal investigation. I've actually came along to James Anthony's house because
Hello!
I've been trying to pin you down to interview you for ages.
You have.
And I've finally got to do it.
I mean, you didn't do it on the other 4 invests we did over the last couple of weeks, but you know, there's always time, Jamie. There's always time. But yeah, no, it's lovely to have you. And we're back where it all started, aren't we?
Yeah.
4 years ago.
August the 20th.
Yeah, 2020, during COVID as well.
Oh yeah, now we're on, I think this is number 200 and, I think it's 210 this one.
Wow.
If off my head that is.
Yeah.
210,
Yeah, that's quite kind of
210
scary,
shows,
isn't it?
Yeah. So we've gone round in a big circle.
We have.
But it's not about the show tonight, it's about you.
Oh, lovely.
I'm going to interview you tonight. Because, I mean, obviously I've been on a lot of investigations with you.
Oh, loads, haven't we, yeah.
But I want to know, coming from your side now, and let's start off first with one which you...
One?
The first investigation you ever went on.
The first investigation I went on was... No, I've got to think now. So, a proper investigation, I think, would have probably been when you and I, years ago, did a night at the Citadel in St Helens.
Wow, yeah.
And I'd been interested in it before then, but I think that was where I properly kind of sat down and we actually did a night of investigation. Now that was coming up to 20 years ago, 18 years ago it would have been.
It was 2006
it was when we did it. And that still is one of my favourite ones because I think the amount of different things that we got, and we was all a little bit inexperienced, well I certainly was, and obviously I don't think you'd been doing it very long then either. And I think the amount of things that we got with it was absolutely amazing. I mean, we had noises, lights, you took pictures and there was images in the pictures in the mirror.
Man with the flat cap.
Yeah, with a hat on. We heard singing, which when we looked there was nobody there. And I think that was probably out of everything. There was a group of us there. I think that's probably one of the best investigations that in terms of things that you look back and you think, wow, I can't explain that.
Especially the voice. The person singing.
Yeah, I mean, that was just so... And I think what was so interesting about that was, if you remember, it was a Monday night, so it wasn't busy in St Helens, it was quiet. We all heard it, and it was very, very clear. But I think the thing is what was a real unfortunate thing is obviously because it was a bit of an ad hoc thing, we didn't have recorders, and we didn't have stuff like that. Phones didn't do it then and everything. And, you know, excuse me, it was... the only thing we've got now is our memories of that. And it's a real pity, isn't it?
It's funny because I didn't think you were going to say that one, because that didn't cross my mind about the one in the Citadel. Because my son was there that night as well.
He was, that's right, yeah.
We just finished the show.
We just finished rehearsals, hadn't we, for the show we was working on.
There were also some other songs.
Yeah.
And then what we done then is we said, should we do a paranormal investigation?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was just a afterthought, wasn't it? We just
I think we was talking about the history of the place and the supposed ghosts and things. And then we thought, oh, you know what, let's do it. And I think there was maybe about 5 or 6 of us. And it was incredible. I mean, we heard, if you remember this one as well, we heard somebody walk. You went up because we heard somebody walking along the balcony, didn't we? We heard footsteps and like a rustling sound going. And I, you know, I mean, over the years, the sister, you know, we did quite a few different things. I mean, there was one night in there where we actually had this on film. I've not got the footage of it, it's long gone. But all the lights flashed. There was a big flash of light in the auditorium in the dark. And what was really interesting is the camera was at the back of the stage, and when the light occurred, and we was asking to give us a sign on the camera, the light came from the stage. You could see it reflect and everything, but there was nothing where that could have come from. So that was really, really interesting. And I think kind of, you know, through over the years, I've always had a big interest in it. I was lucky. I used to work for quite a number of years, helping out down at a castle in near Derby, just helping with ghost hunts there, and that was amazing. That was amazing. Really good fun. And was lucky enough to stay there quite a number of times, helping out with it. I used to go down to help out with me and my friend would stop over and stuff. And we didn't stop, we weren't doing paranormal things we were stopping. but we saw figures, we heard noises, there was all sorts of things that happened. And what was interesting is most of them things would happen after everyone had gone for the ghost, so we'd just be sat there just relaxing outside, and suddenly something would happen, and we weren't thinking about it. And I think that was more interesting for me, because it wasn't when we were looking for it. We'd be sat just listening to a bit of music and just relaxing, and suddenly we'd see something, or there'd be a noise, and it would take you out of it. So you weren't thinking about it then. And I learned an awful lot in that time, because I think kind of one of the things that, and I know you're quite in agreement with me on this, is I think when you do this kind of stuff and you're interested in it, nobody is an expert in it. And if anyone says, I'm an expert in it, then I don't think that's true, because actually, nobody really knows what it is.
I think they're more experienced.
They've got experience in it. And I think people might be an expert in things such as history of certain things, or an understanding of something. So, for example, if you might have somebody who's really well read on things, think certain elements of the occult or things like that, and they can be an expert in that because of the research that they've done and everything they've done. But I think if somebody turned around and said to me, I'm an expert on ghosts, I would say, well, maybe not ghosts themselves, maybe you're an expert on the apparent different types of hauntings and stuff like that. But actually to be an expert on something that you don't actually know exists is kind of impossible, really. So I think that the thing I find very interesting as well is how people's perceptions and how people's kind of thoughts when they go into an investigation can massively influence what they experience. Do you know what I mean by that?
I do, yeah.
And I've seen it before, where I've seen people who something has happened which has been completely natural. There'll be a noise, it's windy or whatever, and rather than understanding that, thinking about the fact that it is just the wind, they will instantly, they want it so much to be something paranormal that they will not accept that it isn't. And I think one of the people always say to me, what advice would you give me if you're doing this? I'd always say, look, you've always got to look for a logical explanation to something, because if you then can't find one, that massively reinforces the evidence that you've got. So we know from things that we've experienced, we've had loads of stuff where we've been able to kind of discount that it has been paranormal.
Yeah.
But then, because we follow that process, when we do experience things, that means then that we really know that there is something strange that's occurred that we can't explain at that particular time. Do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah. Now, there's one thing I forgot to ask right at the beginning was, what got you into I always find it interesting what got people into the paranormal. What got you into the paranormal?
Well, with me, my granddad was from Liverpool, and he was from Everton. Right, literally, and the houses have all gone now. But right where the water tower is in Everton, he grew up literally just opposite there. And he grew up in the war. He was born in 1940 in a blitz, and in fact the hospital actually got bombed the night he was. I think it was the night he was born or the night after he was born, the 23rd of December. And he was moved up to Blackpool. There's a lot of people were at the time when he was little. They were evacuated up to there, and then moved back to Liverpool. And he was a real character, but he was always interested in ghosts and things like that. And he was quite religious, but he'd always seen different things and experienced different things and spoke about it all the time. So when I was little and we used to go out walking and also, he'd always be telling me ghost stories and things that he'd seen. And that's what triggered me being interested in it, because we used to talk about it all the time. Now, he passed away when I was 15, so it was when I was a teenager, so I wasn't, it wasn't something that kind of I was major interest in, but it had always been in the back of my mind from being little, really. And it was just as I got older that's where I started to kind of get more interested in it. And I think obviously when you're younger, you don't really take anything serious. But I think particularly as I've got older now, and I'm kind of not approaching middle age, but almost getting there. I think that you tend to look at things differently, and I think now the thing I really enjoy about it is that I almost like going to places, because I think when you go into somewhere you actually experience something. Everyone always says, I get really scared, and I don't get scared. I get so excited when something happens, because you can't describe that feeling. And when you actually hear something or see it and you can't explain it, I think it changes your perception and outlook on life. And I think that's one of the reasons why I keep doing it, because I've seen so many things where I think to myself, what was that? Now, I'm not saying it's the dead. I don't know what was causing it, but things that logically I can't explain.
Right.
You know, and if somebody came up to me and said, yeah, it's this, well, that's fair enough. But at the minute, I can't explain what it is.
Well, it's like anything. It's like with the paranormal. There's no explanation for anything.
Absolutely.
I know when you debunk things, that's the explanation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's no end to it. There doesn't seem to be an end to it. It just seems to continue, go on and on and on. And it's like an addiction.
Yeah, it is.
It's like an addiction that, will we ever get to that point where we will have a manifestation in front of us, and will we be able to talk to it?
It almost makes you wonder whether, you know, and I've heard people talk about this before, that we're not actually allowed to know the answer. And so it's almost like one of those kind of like a mirage that you almost think you've got to, and then or a rainbow. You know, when you see the rainbow in the distance, and no matter how far you drive, it keeps going the same distance away. And I almost think it can be a little bit like that, because you kind of think you've figured stuff out, and then actually something will happen, and you think, well, that doesn't match up at all. So you never quite get the end. There's always a mystery element to it, and I think that's what fascinates a lot of people, because ultimately everybody wants, you know, regardless of whether, you know, what your belief is, I think everyone wants to kind of think that, you know, there is something after you pass, you know, and you go on to somewhere or something or other. But there's, you know, that's I think that's something in everybody, because people can't comprehend not existing. If you think about not existing, it's a very difficult thing for us as human beings to actually kind of even, you know, for us to even comprehend, because we're always aware of being conscious apart from when we're asleep. So I think that mystery is what drives people to keep looking for things. For me, I'm not, you know, and I know I've said this to you before, I know you're pretty similar. I understand why people use a lot of technology on paranormal investigations, and I find it really interesting when people use REM pods and ghost boxes and, you know, all these different tools. But for me, it's a very personal thing, and I think that I'd much rather go into a dark room with nothing and see what I experience, because I've experienced so much more with that. And ultimately it's then personal to me, and I know what I've experienced. And, you know, I mean, another great example that was incredibly strange was, I think one night, and I think you was there when we were in Mill Street, we were in the cellar, and we heard footsteps walking across the deck above us. You know, above up in the room. Now, we knew, there was us in that building, we knew there was nobody else in there, because we had the keys, we was locked in, and we heard the footsteps. The night where we was in there, and we could see, you know, Marie and I could see the shadow on the floor, and it went down the corridor and went up. Now, people could turn around to me and say, well, you've imagined it, or was you tired? I wasn't tired, I was perfectly fine, and we both saw that happen. Yeah. Now, I don't know what it was, but it was something that formed a shadow and went up through the roof.
Well, I remember that, because I was behind
you. Yeah, you were looking the other way.
I was looking the other way.
You was, yeah, that's right.
But you both gave simultaneously the same description. You both went, it's gone up, it's gone up.
We both saw it.
Exactly the same.
We both saw it at the same time.
And it was clear.
Yeah, and it was, and that was something where we could clear. And then the other one at Mill Street was one night where I was sat with a couple of people in the wardroom, and I saw a figure come out of, you know, there's a little door that goes into the kitchen. The lights were off, there was a candle lit, and it was when there was a ghost hunt on, and they were off in other parts of the building. And I saw something walk out of there, and it walked out of the room, right? And the best way to describe it was, it literally looked like the figure of a person with its head was like an egg. And when I say an egg, it was like, if you look at an egg, like a hen's egg, it's just smooth, isn't it? It was completely smooth, and it came out, and I'm not going to give no word of a lie. I was out that room very, very quickly, outside.
What was that you were saying? You don't get frightened? What?
Oh, I did at the time. I was shocked, and I went outside, and I was like, I can't go back in again. And somebody came out and said, you'll be all right, come back inside. I said, I'm not going back in. Anyway, after about 5 minutes, I calmed down a bit and I went in then. But it shocked me more than anything, because I almost couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. It literally looked like a person, but the face was completely devoid of anything. It just looked like a flat, like an egg.
Was it clear?
Yeah, it was as clear as anything. It literally came out, and I went, ran off, you know. And now looking back, I think, God, I wish I hadn't have done, because I
think
shouldn't
it's
have done
instinct.
that.
I think
But
that's
I was so shocked at the time that it was just me, when people talk about fight or flight, I literally just shot outside. And it was, and now looking back, I think, well, I was silly really, I shouldn't have done. But ultimately, I was a bit terrified. So, but that again was something, when I got in that night, and I sat up for about 3 hours thinking to myself, well, could it have been this, could it have been that? And I still can't, comprehend what it would be. And I think that's the thing that keeps you interested in it, because I think every time, sometimes you go out and you don't get very much, but other times you'll get something, you'll find something, you think, God, that's really interesting, And sometimes we've been to some places where we've had nothing, and other nights where we've been to places and we've had loads.
I think some of the places I've been with you love the history.
Oh, I do, yeah,
background
absolutely,
as well.
yeah.
When you go to an investigation, sometimes you don't know where we're going. We just say we're picking up James and you're coming up.
Yeah, that's
do you want
right,
to come with us? So you don't have time to look.
Well, when we went to that witches coven the other week, I mean, I'd never even heard of that place before.
That was creepy.
And you didn't tell me where it was before we were going. You just said we're going out somewhere and picked us up, and then we got there. And that was one of those places where even before you told me what it was incredibly creepy. And that atmosphere, I can't stop talking about this to people who are not, because I've never known anywhere where we've gone where it felt so uncomfortable and so creepy from the moment we set foot in that place. It was the whole thing.
But even the elements and
the wind and the rain, it was like a horror film. It really was.
We were actually living.
Yeah.
Because we cut short the investigation that night as well.
Yeah, we did.
We thought no.
Because we were going to do it over 2, weren't we? And then we ended up cutting it short. But going back to what you were saying, I think it's kind of it's that environment that you put yourself in and what you experience. And I think when you genuinely experience something, it's such an interesting thing to do, And don't get me wrong, I know that there might be people listening who think, oh, you know what, it's all in your head, it's all rubbish. And maybe it is something that we all invent. We don't know that. But equally, when people turn around, the thing that always irritates me is when people turn around and say, there's no such thing as ghosts. Well, there was no such thing as gravity until it was discovered. There was no such thing as black holes until it was discovered. There was no such thing as, the expansion of the universe until it was discovered. So ultimately, people turn around and say, there's no such thing as ghosts. Well, you don't actually know. There might not be any proof of it at the minute, but that doesn't mean to say that they don't exist.
Well, they say that, but in religion, they say the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, of course they do, yeah.
Yeah, and that's not against anything religion.
Oh, no, not at all. Absolutely, yeah.
They do use that as a spirit, and it's used quite a lot within the religions.
Yeah,
so,
the whole, I've got this, spiritual elements of religion is what it's all about. The Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, when you pass, you go over, you got, regardless of what with a lot of religion, you'll pass on to a different plane, and I think kind of if you look at spiritualism as a religion, that obviously talks about the continuation of the soul, and most religions, when you come back to them, talk about the continuation of the soul. Now, if you don't believe in a particular religion or a particular route, and you're an atheist, you don't believe anything in you, that you believe that your soul, your light, once you die, that's it. That's fair enough, because that's your right to believe in that. But the one thing I would say is in my opinion, is that actually, I'm not saying I don't disagree with anyone's right to believe what they like. However, I don't like it when people turn around and say, well, there isn't any such thing as ghosts, because actually you don't know that there isn't. You don't know that. You don't know that there isn't. There might be. You might not have experienced it. But if I'm ever talking to someone and they say to me, I've seen a ghost, and they tell me about it, I'm not in a position to judge whether what they're saying is real or not. I might think, well, could it be this or that? But ultimately, they are the ones who feel like they've experienced it, Yeah. And I think that's hugely important.
Now, this is going to be a question like, do you prefer going with the public or doing private investigations, or both?
Do you mean as in like going on like a public event, or going with like us?
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
Investigation, yeah. Or
I think that I generally prefer doing it with our group, because I think that when we go out, we know each other very well and we know where we stand with things. And I think that because we've known each other for a long time, we're quite comfortable and relaxed with each other. And I think that's a really key thing. Because I think when we go to places, we all know each other, we all have a laugh when we're doing it. It's good fun, and I think that we're all relaxed when we go in there. We also
it's a good bond.
Yeah, and we also support each other as well. And I think that's a real key thing, because ultimately you can be in a very dark, cold, scary house at 3:00 in the morning. And I've been on public ones before, with groups. And I think the thing I found hard with that is that, and don't get me wrong, I think there's some absolutely amazing groups that go out and do paranormal nights, I think they do an amazing job. And I think for a lot of people who want to go and experience it, I think it's a really great route into doing it. But I think sometimes what I found is that, like, if I've been feeling something or I'm picking something up, I think if there's a lot of people that I don't know, sometimes I'm a little bit more reserved about saying it, because I always think, well, I don't want them to think I'm a bit strange or whatever. Whereas if I'm with my friends, it doesn't really matter, because they know they know what I'm like anyway.
We've done a lot of public events. We've done
we've led them before, haven't we?
Everything else, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I do as well. Yeah.
But we've come round in a circle now, because we're now back into not doing public events.
Yeah.
But doing them on our own.
Yeah.
I do miss the public events. I've got to admit that I do miss them, and we have got one coming up in Halloween. But I just love we've noticed it before, and I'm going to ask you the same. Do you find that when there's only a smaller group, we experience more than what we are with a large group?
Yeah, I think so.
I know it sounds like a daft question
to
answer.
No, I know what you mean. I think so, because I think that I think when you've got, depending on where you are, if you're in a building, for example, and you've got 30, 40 people there, I think it can be difficult sometimes to know what sounds are, because there's other people around about. When we've done them at Mill Street, the public events, obviously we can hear people moving and things like that, so a lot of it you can discount. Whereas I think when it's a small group and there's only us in one room, there's nobody else there, that kind of audible evidence that we get, there's much less things it could be that's causing it, because obviously all buildings and things, sound carries and things of, a joist might affect another room and all sorts of stuff like that. But equally, I think the thing is one of the things that I really love about the public stuff, particularly when we've run them, is I love it when people come in and they have a fantastic time.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. And that's why I always, if people turn around to me and say, I'm thinking of going and doing a ghost, I'm like, go and do it. Go. There's loads of great companies who do events at all these fantastic places, and they're really, really good. They know what they're doing. They look after people. Go out there and do it. And I think the difference between us is that I think because we've been doing it a long time and we're quite interested in it, I think we tend to prefer more to do it as our group, because we can now. But if it's something you're interested in getting into, or you just do it as a casual thing, you can get in some great locations with these groups.
Oh,
just do it. It's and we know quite a lot of them who are really, really great, and they put so much passion and energy into it. And they also go off and do their own stuff as well.
That's right.
They do the groups, but they also do their own individuals, because they're so interested and passionate about it.
I'm going to ask you a question. What's the most frightening experience you've ever had? Tell us a little bit of a story of how it happened and that.
I think the most frightening one was when Jonathan was in that blooming ticket booth that stopped at Northwich Plaza.
Yeah,
and he shot the torch on his face, yeah. The most frightening expo, let me think about this. Years ago, I've not thought about this that long, it's hard to remember what actually happened. Years ago, we was at Derby Jail, and there was a small group of us had gone down, and we was in the condemned man's cell, which is when you go into Derby, and we had a great afternoon, and obviously it's Richard Felix who owns it, who was amazing, absolutely amazing, and
legend.
We was talking for ages and everything like that, and he was telling us all the stories and everything. And when we stayed the night, we was in the condemned man's cell, and there's kind of two cells when you go into it. And we were sat in there, and there was me and my mate, and it went, and it was dark, but it went darker than dark, and it went freezing cold. And both of us felt like there was some big, huge, tall man stood in that room with us. And it was so, and there is a spirit there who's apparently like this. And it was incredible. The feeling that you got was this feeling of utter dread. And we was like, and we'd said we was going to stay in there for half an hour, and we did. And when it came to come out, it was so eerie. And I ended up going out. I had to go to sleep because I was completely drained after it. And another one that really creeped me out was a really good friend of mine, Paul. You've met Paul before. When we used to do our work at the castle, we was down there one night and we were staying. And it wasn't a paranormal weekend. I think it was it was like a living history weekend we were working on. And we were staying in a room downstairs, and there was a window that looked out, and basically outside the room was a drop going right the way down because it was like high up room. And Paul was very not scared of anything, If anything happened, he wasn't bothered. And he got creeped out because he was talking to me and looked at the window behind me and saw the face of an old man peering through the window from the outside. And he went, "Oh my God." And I went, "What?" And we went outside, and he went through, he said, "I've just seen the face of an old man peering through the window." And I went cold. Now, we was in our sleeping bag, stopping downstairs in that room. So we went, I had a cup of coffee, and then I thought to myself, right, I'm going to get in the sleeping bag. Paul went in there, out like a light, straight away to sleep. Now, obviously, because I'd had a coffee, I couldn't get to sleep. The window was about 20 foot high with these big, huge curtains on it, huge, big window. And I thought, I'm going to have to cut the curtains because if that face comes back and it's looking through again. Well, the curtains would only shut so far, and they were that high up. I couldn't obviously get up to the top to drag them over. I'm trying to shut them, and literally I couldn't. So there was a gap in the window, about 3 foot gap, and I'm laying in the bed and I couldn't get to sleep, and I'm thinking to myself, if I hear tapping on that window now, I can't look. Next minute I thought, I need to go to the toilet. And I really needed to go to the toilet. To get to the toilet, I had to walk past the window, to go down the corridor to go into where the toilet was. And I'm not joking, I put my hands up for hours and walked through to get to the toilet. I went back again, and anyway, I didn't see anything, but that really creeped me out because it was playing on my mind. And I thought to myself, if I see that, if that face is there, that really scared me, because I know Paul really well. I know what he's like with stuff, and his reaction to it was a genuine. He wasn't making it up. He'd seen it, and there was absolutely no way anybody could be outside the place, because you couldn't. Number one, you couldn't get there. You'd have to be about 20 foot tall to reach the window. That really creeped me out. They were the two things that really. And there was also one night where the same place where we heard a scream, which did scare me at the time, but it could have been somebody nearby, and it just echoed through and something like that. That kind of creeped me out at the time of what it was. But the face really did I did find that very eerie.
And would you go back to that place again? Or?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've been there loads and loads of times. It is somewhere that's really kind of special to me, and I absolutely would go back. I was going to go back there relatively recently. Unfortunately, couldn't, just due to other commitments. But it is a great place, and it was mad because the very first time I went, I almost felt like I'd been there before. It felt so homely. And we did some, and I'd say a lot of the time was down there. It wasn't anything to do with paranormal. It was all other stuff that they used to do and used to help out with. Nothing ghost related, but the ghost stuff was fab. It really, really good fun.
And do you find? Would you prefer indoors or would you prefer outdoors, or like I said before, both of them? Because we've both done it. We've both been out. We went to Shirley Park that time. We went to Shirley. We've done some locations.
I think, to be honest with you, that sometimes I think the outdoors. I'm laughing here because you just got me thinking about when we went to Siding Lane the other week and all the cars were parked up, and I'm on about, do you prefer it indoors or outdoors? I think sometimes the outside investigations I think can be quite interesting, and I think particularly when you go to certain places we've been, and actually they're not very well investigated because they're outdoors. And also, I think things such as when we've used things like the K2 meters and we've used the cat balls and stuff, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and stuff starts happening, that's very, very... When we were at the Spooky Cave a couple of weeks back and we were using things and the K2 was going off and the cat balls were going off, and that's literally in the middle of nowhere, you know. Mm-hmm. That for me is really, really fascinating. I think the problem is that things like sounds and it going cold and stuff like that, when you're outdoors, is really difficult because there's so many different things that can cause, with animals or weather or whatever, can cause that. So I do think in terms of if you want to control things more, being indoors is much better because you've got much more control. And I think kind of, especially in the winter, it's, you know, if you're being outside, it can be a bit miserable if it's cold and stuff like that. But I think it depends. I think it all depends on the location. Like, I'd love to go down to some of where the historic battles used to take place, old battlefields and things, and you hear stories of certain anniversaries where people will see a vision of the battle replaying in the sky. You know, there's a storm, they'll see it replaying in the sky and things. And I'd love to do things like that. But I think it depends on what, you know. You could go into a building that isn't haunted at all and have a rubbish night and go outdoors to somewhere that apparently is haunted and get loads of stuff. I think it just depends on what the activity is, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, me and you, when we get the chance, we're out and about.
Absolutely, yeah.
Not just indoors, we're outside, we're looking for places outside because we've done a lot of the inside, and a lot of people do a lot of the inside, whereas now we're like, well, let's go and do something different.
The other thing I think about as well is that, and I know you've spoke about this before, is if you've got somewhere where there's an awful lot of paranormal investigations going on, you know, every Friday, Saturday, every week, I always think to myself, like, I wonder whether it affects the amount of activity that happens if it's all the time. Because I know when we used to find sometimes when Mill Street was very, very busy, if we went in with our group, and we were obviously the resident group then, we sometimes wouldn't get as much. But if there'd been nothing on for a while, we'd then seem to start getting more stuff happening. What do you think about that? Do you think that's the truth?
I fully agree because the prime example, I think, is lockdown.
Yeah.
When we had lockdown, as you know, I was like a keyholder, so I was in on a regular basis.
You were checking the building.
Yeah. And when I was in there on my own, sometimes I felt fine. It was just like, it was daylight really when I went. You know. But I went one night, and this is supposed to be about you, this, you know.
No, but I'm just interested in your...
One night when I went in, and I had to go to the cellar, you know, because there's that part where you got to check the water. No, it was down in the cellar, and just to keep me, because it was getting a bit darkish then anyway, I thought, you know, I'm going to have to keep myself man go. So I started, like, you know, because we're doing the radio, I started recording the radio, a little bits and pieces, practicing doing things. And I went into the cellar, I got to the far end, and then turned around, this dark shadow come right across me.
I remember you saying about that,
And that's when I thought, I'm on my own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, and really, if you go on an investigation, take two of you, even if somebody else in another part of the world.
We were about this the other week because I think when we went out, we was out and we kind of said about where we were going, and we was like, no, we won't do that because there's only two of us. And I do think it can be a bit concerning if you do go out on your own, because from a safety perspective, if you have an accident or anything, you know, it can be very dangerous. So I think you should always let people know where you're going, and also at least have two people. You know, that's more than I know. I know there's a lot of people who like going out on their own. You know, that's what they enjoy. Fair enough, but I think it's safer with two.
Have you ever done an investigation on your own anyway?
Well, you know what? When I moved into this place, which is, you know, a very old house. I heard some noises and stuff like that, and I've got to say I did actually go in and say, look, I've moved in here now. You're very welcome to stay, but please don't bother me, or something along those lines. And I've got to say, it's been, you know, you've been here loads. It's a very calm atmosphere.
Very relaxing house.
But I've never. Sometimes I think what's quite interesting is I always think the more you do this, the more sensitive you become. And I'm not saying like I'm certainly not a medium or anything like that, but I think you become sensitive to energies and atmospheres and feelings and stuff. And I very often will go out for a walk, and sometimes I'll be somewhere. And it happened to me this probably about 2 months ago. And I was walking, and I walked through the old cemetery, the St Helens cemetery, and I wasn't thinking anything about it. It was only about, I think it was about 6 o'clock, something like that. Quite a nice night. And I was walking, and I felt something just come like that, and like something was right near me, and it came and it alerted me to it. And I wasn't even thinking anything to do with paranormal. I think I just kind of, I don't know what I was thinking about. And I felt like it was walking with me. And I got to the bottom of where the gate is, and I said to it, right, that's enough. Stay here now. And as I was walking off, I knew it was getting further away. But I found that very interesting, because I wasn't thinking, I wasn't going in there, I wasn't doing anything like paranormal. I was just walking through, But it alerted me to it. But I think I haven't done an investigation on my own, because I just wouldn't enjoy it. Because I also like validating things as well. If I heard something, I'd be like saying to me, did you hear that as well,
The only time I do an investigation on my own is if there was somebody else in another section.
If
you said to me now, Jamie, you're in my living room, I'm going to go upstairs, do a call out down here and let me know how you get on. I'd do that kind of lone visual.
No, that's fine. But I thought you meant as in somewhere, like if I said to you, right, I'm going now, you stay here and do an investigation on your own, I wouldn't want to do that. But if you was like upstairs and I was down here, that's fine.
Yeah, because you can shout, and you always... Because
I
I say this a lot, and somebody else asked me this a while back, is, would you do one on your own? I was no.
No.
Yes, I would, if there was somebody else...
other people. Yeah.
In shouting distance.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
It's safety in numbers, especially when people are going into old buildings.
Yeah, well, this is it. And I mean, the thing as well is that, one of the things that I haven't, partly because of me, a lot of stuff I deal with in my career is about people's safety when they do stuff. And one of the things I'm really keen on is that I don't go to anywhere where I think there's a risk of my personal safety or people I'm with safety being at risk. And so I would never do, unless it had been risk assessed and approved and insured, I would never do an abandoned building. I would never do something where, where access has been restricted for people if it's derelict. If some people choose to do that, that's their decision. But me personally, I would never put I know you've probably similar thoughts to this, I wouldn't put my personal safety at risk. That's just me. I'd rather go to somewhere where I know that regardless of what happens, I'm safe. That's what I'm like with stuff like that.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
Now let's go on to equipment, James.
Come on. Oh yeah.
What equipment would you take with you on a paranormal investigation, or would you or would you like to have a no equipment?
Well, you know what I think. I'm not. I've got to be honest. I mean, I understand why people use them, but I'm not a massive fan of spirit boxes. The things. I'm not a massive fan of spirit boxes. I'm not a massive fan of apps and stuff, because I find the spirit boxes very distracting, and in my mind, I've never quite understood how, and I'll think with things like apps and stuff, if we don't know what a spirit actually is made of and what it is, right, how has somebody created something on a phone that it can interact with? Now, that's not me saying it doesn't work, but I'd love to know how, if it's something that's formless, right, and it's just an energy, how somebody has figured out how to make something that a spirit can interact with on a phone. Because if I gave you a phone and said, right, through your energies, make that phone say something, you won't be able to do it, would you, without touching it?
No.
So I don't understand how people have made this work. And and that's not me saying it doesn't. If somebody can explain to me how it works, then that'd be really interesting. But I've looked into it, I've researched it, and I just don't understand how, the same with the spirit boxes. For me, it's just a radio scanner that occasionally will flash past a radio frequency and put a word out. Now people will say, well, that will give the words across and stuff like that, maybe it does. But I've never been, me personally, I've never been that convinced by them. The things that I do think are really interesting on investigations, which I love using the pendulum, because you can see in here I've got a crystal, but I love using the pendulum. I always find the pendulum really interesting. I really like the cat balls, because I think with them, if a spirit just, if you think of something poltergeistal that moves things, it nudges it and it makes that go off. And I do think the K2 is interesting, because we've had loads of interesting things with those. And if you think about a spirit as energy, you can move it and that will make that flutter. So I think if I'm going out, other than a torch obviously, I think candles, cat balls, the K2, and like REM pods. I really like REM pods as well.
Well, talking about REM pods, I watch a lot of YouTube now.
Yeah.
I enjoy the debunkers now. I'm just organising an interview with a debunker, so that's going to be a really interesting show.
Yeah.
I've been watching them, and I watched one the other day, and they were talking about the REM pods. And I don't know whether you've seen the video where the REM pod it moves.
That's right. Yeah.
He's debunked it.
Yeah.
And it's Beardo. Go and watch Beardo.
Oh yeah, Beardo. Yeah, Beardo's great. Yeah.
I'm not going to name names, but
yeah.
I'll say if you want to see this, go and watch Beardo. And
he's dead funny as well.
He's brilliant. Yeah. Side Eye Guy's brilliant. Ethos is brilliant. And the Grey Man. And I watch these people because it educates me as well. It educates me.
And just going back, this is what I'm saying about things like the spirit boxes and the apps. I'm absolutely not saying that they don't work as people do, and I know that some people get some really interesting things off them. I'm not saying that they don't, but at the minute, I don't understand how they work, and I'd love somebody to say to me, this is exactly how that spirit makes that app work and interacts with you, because then I would believe it. And what I find dead interesting is with you is when we go out, you use one, but you always turn off your data connection.
Wi-Fi, yeah.
Because we've seen before when we've been out with that app, if we're in a certain area, it'll come up with words that relate to that area, because it might be on a GPS. And I've also wondered as well, I wonder whether some of them, if you think about things like, Siri and Axie microphone, whether if it hears certain words or phrases, it will throw up certain letters, stuff. Do you know what I mean, and stuff like that? Because technology is amazing, especially with AI and everything like that now.
We do use the Spirit Box, Spirit
Talker, yeah.
I only use it because it's a sound effect for the show.
Yeah.
And it brings another dimension to the show.
And it has been interesting sometimes, hasn't it?
Because we can't, for the radio, when you're doing an investigation on the radio, you can't have nothing.
Yeah, of course.
Because you can't sit there and go, if there's anybody there, and go quiet for 30 seconds, because somebody is sitting in the house is going to go, what's happening?
No,
so you've got to have that interaction with people. But personally, if I went out and about, I'd love to be able to just do one where it's just nothing. We do sometimes when we go out, we're not recording.
Well, we don't take anything. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think and I think one of the interesting things is before we've been out recording before, we finished recording, but then we've actually ended up staying a bit longer, haven't we? Because we've just done our own thing. And I think that now, when we've been out recently, we used very little stuff. I mean, when we did one the other week, we lit about 3 candles, which was dead interesting because one of them was almost being put out.
That was weird.
We put 2 cat balls down, and that was it. And we used the pendulum, and that was literally it.
Another one is, what's the difference in how between the paranormal now than what it was years ago? What kind of changes have you seen?
Do you mean some
of them are logical changes, but how we used to do paranormal investigations years ago to how we use paranormal investigations now, because we've got the apps coming in,
this is it.
The SLS, people use SLS,
and
things like that. What's your opinion on it?
I think kind of that. See, my big interest in it is I love the stories, and I think you can't be, on a cold, stormy winter's night when the wind's howling, if you've got a few candles lit and a fire going, you can't beat a really good ghost story.
Mm.
And that's the thing that I really like about it. I love the atmosphere. I love the fact that you're putting yourself in a situation where you're not going to be, you're putting yourself in a different environment, and you're sensing these things. And I think for me, what I've noticed is that when if you went back 30 years ago, there was a very small number of people who were doing paranormal cases, but very, very low. It was a much smaller thing, and it's exploded really across the. It's massively exploded across global popularity. Through television and through books and through the internet and everything like that. And now particularly with things like YouTube, where anybody can go and make something and put something on the internet and get seen by loads of people, social media and things. But I think kind of that a lot of people now, because they're really trying to capture stuff for video evidence and things, so a lot of stuff is when people are going out, they're filming and they're doing that, which is great. But I think, for me personally, I think that what I used to really enjoy, and I still enjoy most, is just going into somewhere without all of that stuff and just focusing on the moment that you've got, that you're the moment that you're there. And that's one of the reasons why I also think, you always talk about the paranormal and how it helps people's well-being. That's one of the reasons why I actually think that it does so good for things like anxiety and stuff, especially if you've got, if you're ruminating on things and stuff like that, because you're so focused on what's happening there and then, it keeps your mind in the moment, and it centralises you on the moment. And I found that really helpful in the past if I've been stressed, because I'm focused on where I am now in that dark room and what's happening. It takes you out of that thing. So I do think, I think the change in it has been that there's so many more different ways now that people can attempt to contact spirits and interact with spirits. But I also still believe that if you went back to 200, 150 years ago, the best things that you can sense them with is your own senses. Because ultimately, I could show you 500 pictures that I say was a ghost, and I could tell you 500 stories about ghosts that I've seen. But until you've seen one or experienced something for yourself, you won't 100% believe in it. So you can have all the evidence you like on YouTube and everything like that, but until you've actually experienced it, you won't believe in it. And I've always thought that, that's always been my opinion.
I fully agree with you 100% because there's not more. It's difficult to prove the paranormal.
It is, and I do feel really sorry for people who have to kind of, I'm on quite a few, different Reddit and stuff like that. Reddit. And you see people post things of pictures and stuff like that, and this is a ghost or whatever. And I always try and give a pretty balanced response and say, look, it probably isn't. It's probably a pattern on the wall. You've taken a screenshot, if it's a screenshot of a video where you've seen something, then post the full video, not just a screenshot of it where you've circled that figure, that what looks like a figure. Post the full thing showing the camera moving so you can see, does the figure appear, does it disappear? Is it just a tree that at that particular moment, the light catching it has made it into look like a ghost? And I've seen a lot of stuff like that gets posted online. Or photographs of things where it's lens flare and stuff like that. And ultimately, some people get frustrated by it and say, "Oh, it's silly that. Why would you think that was a ghost?" And I think it's right, to be critical and think critically about it and debate it.
Oh, definitely.
And put opinions forward. But ultimately, it doesn't really get me frustrated, because I always think, well, you know what? If you're putting that forward and you're that desperate to think that it is paranormal, then for whatever you want to do, I know that probably isn't. But if you want it to be that, so I think the sad thing about it then is you then lead on to people who are doing it for attention, and I'm sure you've seen as well, where you've seen pictures posted up, and this is a look at this ghost, and it's a screenshot of a Facebook live stream that someone's done, and they screenshotted it and circled what apparently is a ghost. And my question is, that looks amazing, but let's see the full video, let's see the full clip and then we can see that there's nothing in there that could look like it, and then we know whether it's paranormal or not, you know.
Well, I remember years ago, we went to Morecambe Winter Gardens.
I've been there, it's really good,
It's
isn't it?
fantastic, and there's balconies, isn't there? You know, there's one on the left and one on the right. And this photograph came out of a person standing on the balcony.
Right.
And yeah, I could see where it was coming from and everything else, and I thought that's interesting. But me being me, you know what I'm like, I'm on the computer and everything else. I thought I'm going to lighten the shadow, see what
the
shadow is, you know. And I worked out that because of the angle of the photograph, it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was a shadow of something. I can't
like a balustrade or something like that. Yeah.
And I said to the person, "It's not a spirit, it's not a ghost. I'll show you." I printed it out and I went, "Look, there, that's what it is. It's that item there, casting its shadow across, and it goes along and then up the wall. Because of the angle you're on, it looks like a spirit." And I proved. I said to him, "Look, there it is. It's shown you." And he was still adamant. That is a spirit. Yeah. You've manipulated that photograph. I didn't. I just lightened it up to show him. I thought, that's what it is.
But this is what I'm saying. There's no use arguing because either they know that it's not and they just want to try and pretend that it is, so they're just faking it, or they're that desperate for it to be something like that they genuinely will not accept that it isn't. And I've taken pictures of things before and I've shown them to you and I've shown them to other people and I've said that's really interesting. And you said to me, well, it is, but actually look at it from this perspective, and it could just be that. And when we've looked at it, we've gone, oh yeah, it's just a pattern on the, some grime on the wall that's looked like a picture. I mean, I got one once of I was out in the woods and I took one, and it really looked like a face. But I took a few, and then when I looked at the next one, it wasn't. It was just the way the leaves were configured. But obviously, at that particular moment, it looked like a face. And I think there was an interesting one, a really interesting one actually that we had, where do you remember when I said about my Ring camera? And what was really strange about that was, is that I was woken up about 1:30 in the morning by what I thought was somebody banging on the front door. Now obviously, I didn't fancy answering the door at 1:30 in the morning. So I looked on the Ring camera, and which is a very good quality one, which is high up outside, so it looks down across the front. Didn't see anybody there, but then saw a flash of light on it that shot up. And I'd gone back to sleep and I'd completely forgotten about it actually. And I went to see you the next day, didn't I? And I said to you, I was telling you about it, about the knocking noise, and said it was really weird because when I checked the Ring camera there was no one there. And Jamie said, oh, well, have a look at the footage, see if you can see anyone. That was when we looked at it and saw the flash, do you remember?
Because we went frame by frame.
We did, and then we saw the flash. And when we slowed it down, it was like a bright white flash of light that went, I think it went up, didn't it?
No, down.
It went down, didn't it? Yeah.
And then just disappeared.
It disappeared, and it was probably for less than a second. And it was, and it went. But what was really interesting about it as well, because I thought, well, could it be a bug or something like that? But it lit up the front as well, didn't it? Now that was really interesting, but if I'd have just took the screenshot of that on the screenshot of it when it was full frame and posted it, that would have looked like, what is this in my garden? And it would have misrepresented what there actually was there, because that would have looked like there was something that was stood on my front. But actually, when you looked at the full footage, it was a split second that something just went and went down.
No, we couldn't debunk that one. It's still an interesting.
It's really interesting on that one. Yeah.
That's a good example of watch it frame by frame, and you can see whether it is. You can think logically then, and that's what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think actually that proves the point that we've watched it frame by frame, and actually we're now more convinced by it because we can't disprove. We just don't know what it is. Whereas if we'd have just looked at the one clip of it where it was full frame, that it was just that, then actually we'd say the same thing, well, what happened before and after,
Well, we looked to see if a car had gone past, we looked at the neighbours to see if their lights on.
There was nothing at all. Really, really fascinating.
Well, it's not long to go before the end of the show now, James, and I'm going to ask you, locations, you've been to quite a few locations, same as us, and that.
Yeah.
What's the most frightening location you've been to? What's the most or the most exciting location you've ever
Most
been to?
exciting location that I've been to. Well, me doing what I do, I really love Morecambe Winter Gardens.
Mhm.
That was fascinating. But again, I like that more because obviously I have a big interest in theatre history and historical theatres. So I think I enjoyed that more, the fact that it was a very old theatre and there's a lot of it that's still kind of, you can still see a lot of the original Victorian stuff in there. In terms of look, I've been to so many that I've enjoyed in different ways. I have to say, I really enjoyed when we went to Northwich Plaza. That was great fun. I really enjoyed that. And I also enjoyed when we went to Bake Up. That was really good. You know, with is it Jenny who were what was the name of the Judith. That's Judith at Bake Up. Yeah, that was really good fun at the theatre there. And I think I've got to say Mill Street, because I think with Mill Street we've had so many different experiences there. It can be a completely different atmosphere from one day to the next. But I think we've had so many different things, you know. It amazes me that there's so much goes on. I also believe in Mill Street, really, that because it's so popular and active, I also think half the stuff that's there has just come along because there's stuff going on. I don't think it was ever there originally. I think it's just moved in because of that. But I think if you was to turn around to me and say, what's the one place you could go to investigate, I would love to do a ghost hunt at Glamis Castle up in Scotland.
Yeah.
Where the Queen Mother was born, Princess Margaret, and that's got so many fantastic stories about it with secret rooms and just so much folklore, and it's a fantastic building, and that would be amazing to do a ghost hunt there, wouldn't it? You know? And
one final question,
yeah,
because we've got to go within a minute or so let's finish on a happy note.
Yes.
What was the funniest thing that ever happened to you?
The funniest thing that come cracking. There's been so many about it. Two of them. One of them was when we was doing a ghost hunt and you phoned us up midway through it, which you recorded that.
The Halloween one,
and it frightened the life out of us. And I think the other one was when, and even though it scared me at the time, was when they scared me at Northwich. Because I think it was so funny afterwards. That was absolutely hilarious. And there was also when we was doing a ghost hunt once with Sunday, and they said that they were psychic. Maybe they were, I don't know. But they came out with at least 15 names. Is it this one? Is it this? Is his name this? Is his name this? And then when they finally got the right one, they said, "Oh, I thought it was that." It was just like, really, yeah. That was quite funny as well.
Oh, I've got to stop you there, James.
Yeah,
We've come to the end of the show, and I'd like to thank you.
Well, thank you very much
for your interview, which, well, a little bit of a chat anyway.
Yeah.
I'm glad I pinned you down, but we've got to go now. But
yeah,
we will be getting out and about, and you will be on the show quite a few times now.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, from James and myself, Jamie, we'll be back again very soon. Well, it'll be next week, actually. So, thanks again, and we'll see you all next week. Good night.
Good night.